Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. My name is Gus Radani. So in this video, I'm gonna read about North American Indians. The first people to live in North American were the American Indians or Native Americans. According to the religious and folk stories of many Indian groups, their earliest ancestors arrived in North America from the inside of the earth. Modern scientists, however, believe that the first Native American came from Asia 50,000 to 80,000 years ago across the Bering Strait from Siberia to Alaska. They were nomads, that is, they did not live in one place but instead were always on the move as they looked for food. In other words, the first American Indians were hunters who followed the animals their food source during times of migration from place to place together. The nomadic people and animals slowly migrate toward the south. B. This early inhabitation spread out all over the North American continent, now Canada, the United States, and Mexico. There was a great variety of language, religious beliefs, and customs among the many tribes and groups of Indians. By the time the first European arrived, the Indians were living in several different cultural areas. The members of various tribes and in each center of culture had frequent contact with one another and shared similar characteristics, but they didn't have much in common with tribes in other cultural areas. For example, the Pima and Papago tribes of the southwestern desert had similar customs and habits, but their lifestyle was completely different from that. The Sioux, who lived on the plains, the Apache in the southwest, and the Quaticool and Tlingit on the northwest coast, or the Natchez and Tonkawas on the Gulf Coast and in Florida. C. The lifestyle of the people who live in each cultural area reflected the geography of the area. The inhabitation of northwest coast, now British Columbia, Canada, lived by hunting and fishing, but they didn't lead a nomadic life. They didn't need to follow animals from place to place because they could take advantage of the resources where they were living. The oceans and rivers produced salmon, halibut, and many other fish. The forests were rich in animal life. They offered deer, elk, and bear, as well as smaller animals. In the forest, the inhabitants could also find berries to eat in wood, boats, furniture, and houses. Geography influenced other areas of life too. Hunting was seasonal work best in summer. Therefore, the tribe members were very busy at certain times of year. But in other reasons, they had the opportunity to spend time in creative activities such as woodworking and art, an art form for which the Northwest Coast Indians became well known. D. Unlike the inhabitants of the Northwest Coast, the Indians of the Eastern Plains had an agricultural society that lived in farming communities and raised crops of corn, beans, squash, and tobacco. The members of these tribes lived differently from those in the Northwest because there were so few trucks and flatlands. Their houses were to earth instead of wood. While the food was growing, the people stayed in their communities. Yet after the harvest, when they had brought in crops, the Indians rode west on horses, gotten from Spanish farmers to hunt buffalo. During the months when they were looking for buffalo, the lifestyle of the hunters were similar to that of the nomadic tribes on the Western Plains. Today's Plains Indians, both Eastern and Western, the buffalo was very important. It provided many necessities. Meat, skin, the buffalo was very important. It provided many necessities for clothing and materials for spoons, bags, and beds. The buffalo hunt was also central to many artistic, social, and religious activities. E. When Europeans arrived on the North American continent several hundred years ago, the Native Americans' old way of life began to change. The differences between Europeans and Indians' values soon led to difficulties As the whites moved west, they look over more and more of the land for themselves. Native Americans lost not only their land but also their lives to widespread wars and to sickness that were non-existent in North America before the Europeans came. But they had lost something even more important: their sense of identity. When the Plains Indians, for instance, lost their hunting grounds, and when the buffalo became almost extinct, the most important characteristic of their society, the buffalo hunt, was gone. Today, although some Native Americans live in urban areas, many live on reservation land that the government set aside for them. Some tribes have held on the language and ancient customs of their ancestors, while others, in general, have forgotten the old ways. Although some groups are relatively wealthy, most are very poor and have had to receive help to government. In recent years, many tribes have begun to regain their sense of identity and their cultural heritage. They are having wars once again, this time in court, where they have succeeded in several legal battles. They are fighting to win back their land and their fishing and hunting rights, the based on the center's way of life. I think that's all. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.